So hello everyone. Hello everyone. So we're gonna start modern history from today onwards, and this would be our very first lecture, in which we'll be covering from the spectrum, specifically two chapters, chapter 3 and chapter 4. Chapter 3 would be containing the advent of Europeans, and chapter 4 will consider some of the later Mughals period, and specifically the decline. So I'm going to start with the basic introduction. So this is modern history. Lecture 1. First and foremost, the reference book that we'll be using. It would be Spectrums, Rajiv Ahir. And for this current lecture, I'll be telling you the context or the chapters which you have to study, which you can study after we'll be finishing with the class. And in this class, the context would be that after I'll be explaining, or I'll be giving you the context or the preface ki what we're gonna study today, and I'm gonna give you a detailed notes also for your reference. For the better understanding, you can reference the standard book. Okay, so this is that reference book which you can refer, right? And in the same context, there are certain chapters which you can refer for today's lecture. First is chapter 3. In this you have advent of Europeans, which includes the arrival of Portuguese, French, English, Danish, and Dutch. So in total we have 5, and subsequently we'll be studying about the primary motive, the introduction of the new route, the different chronologies or the timelines by which Portuguese arrived. After that you have Danish, Dutch, then primary rivalry between French and English, and after the closure of all these except English, we'll be specifically studying about the English East India Company and how they established their own rule in the later Mughal, or in the approx 200 years of rule by the British Empire. Initially English came as a traders. Many of you must be knowing about the English East India Company. So we'll study about them, the rivalries between English and French, the different Carnatic wars, the Anglo-French rivalries, and how they established themselves. And in the second topic for today, we'll be studying from chapter 4 from Spectrum. Both these chapters are specific to Spectrum only, so you can refer these chapters from Spectrum, and I'll be specifically telling you the pages number which you can study to concrete your understanding of the topic. So chapter 4 specifically for today, we will be studying the decline of Mughals. Now the important thing here to understand is that in modern history we'll be starting with the decline after the period of Aurangzeb. So till the time of Aurangzeb, we'll be covering this much of part from medieval time, from Indus Valley civilization till the time of Aurangzeb. This will be covered in ancient and medieval history, and we're going to take this subject in the later half of the course as we proceed. In modern history, we'll be studying from firstly the arrival of the Europeans, the advent of Europeans, and subsequently what causes the decline of Mughals, and how after Aurangzeb there was no Mughal emperor who was able to contain the supremacy of the Mughals in front of the Europeans that were coming to the Indian subcontinent. So I hope you have understood what we are about to study in this lecture. So specifically for chapter 3 there are specific pages you can start with. So for chapter 3 you have page number 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 and 28. And on page number 28 you have to study before Portuguese state. So these pages are specific to the Portuguese arrival, who were the very first Europeans who came to Indian subcontinent. And subsequently for Dutch it's page number 35-36. Danish it is 53 and 54. English it is 37 to 42. And French it is 42 to 44. Here it is French. All these page numbers are specific to Spectrum Rajiv book, so you can directly go through those pages and understand what we're going to study today in our first lecture. And in chapter 4, the decline of Mughals, for today's topic you only have to study from page number 62. And in today's topic the decline would be specific to Bahadur Shah and Jalandhar. So I hope you are able to understand what will be our approach. So I hope you have written all of this. So we're going to start with our very first topic. So very first topic is the advent of Europeans. Firstly, we're gonna understand what were the possible causes, or a preface in which I'll be telling you the lectures. I'll be giving you the notes which you can write down for your own reference, and to concrete the subject knowledge you can refer the Raji or his book. Okay, so firstly in this we're gonna study the introductory part. Then secondly we're gonna start with Portuguese. Then after this we'll be having the Dutch, and fourth would be the Danish, fifth would be English, and sixth would be the French. And subsequently, once we are done with this, this is topic A, which is chapter 3. The B is the later Mughals after Aurangzeb and decline of Mughals. I hope you are able to understand the context and how we're going to approach this topic. So, we'll start with the very first introduction. So please write down in advent of Europeans as an introduction. India had very first contact with the Europe from since the beginning of the history in the form of land route only. Second, but the discovery of the sea route had far-reaching consequences on shape and course of Indian history and society. So in this, you can start by adding the notes that India had a contact with Europe from time memorial through the land route. So usually we were for the trade or any purpose, usually Europe was connected through Middle East and then to Central West, Central and Southeast Asia. So all this was connected through land, and this was the major center for our trade. But the scenario changes when Europe were able to navigate to Indian subcontinent through, I'm just gonna write Indian subcontinent, and this is your Arabian Sea, and this is Europe, and this is your African part, Cape of Good. From here they were able to come to the Indian subcontinent part through for the very first time through sea. So you can write down the very first arrivals from Europe in India. They came as a traders, so that they can simply remove Middle East or Arabs as middlemen. They wanted to trade directly with Indian subcontinents, and they simply don't want to have the dependency on the Middle East. And the very first who came to India was Portuguese. So if I'll just write the chronology, you have Portuguese, then you have Dutch, British, and then French. I hope you are with me and you are able to understand what we are studying so far. So to begin with, we'll start with the Portuguese first. So write down Portuguese. So in this, write down, in Europe, the spirit of adventure that led to the foundation of modern world promoted the geographical discoveries to the far-flung areas. So here we are specifically talking about the trend which was initiated in the Europe is to explore the different continents and areas beyond the European boundaries. Second point you can write, the primary objective of these voyages were earning profit from trade with eastern countries. After this you can write, under Portuguese only we are. And the third point you can write, Prince Henry, who was also known as the navigator, from 1398 to 1460, Prince Henry was also known as the navigator. He was the king of the Portugal, and he took the lead among the European nations and promoted seafaring activities. I hope you will be able to write this. Next point. During the regime of King John II, a sailor, Bartholomew Diaz, crossed the Cape of Good Hope. Now, during the period of King John, sailor Bartholomew Diaz crossed the Cape of Good Hope, and I hope you all know this Cape of Good Hope. In today's time, it is in, like, since the beginning it has been a part of African continent. Specifically in today's time it is in South Africa. So he was the very first sailor who crossed the Cape of Good Hope. And after this you write, during the tenure of King Emmanuel, a sailor, Vasco da Gama, in May 1498 reached the coast of Calicut in India and was welcomed by Zamorians of Kerala. So I'll just write down all the keywords which I just said in this point. King Emmanuel, and I guess we all must be aware about the Vasco da Gama. He reached on the coast of Calicut 1498 and was welcomed by Zamorians of Kerala. All these things which I am telling you right now are very much extracted to let you understand in a very layman language, and the topic, the understanding is very much written in the Spectrum book. You can refer to the pages which I just mentioned in the beginning of the class. Zamorians of Kerala. Similarly, in 1498 he arrived, and in 1503 he opened Vasco da Gama opened trade center at Calicut, Cochin and Cananore. Calicut, please write these down. Cochin, Cananor. I hope you are with me on this point. So I'll just rub this part. Write down the next point. In 1505, so after this you were here and the chronology extent. In 1505, D. Almeida was sent as the first Portuguese viceroy in India. He came up with his blue water policy. Whereby he proposal was to establish Portuguese dominance in Indian Ocean and Arabian Ocean. Establish Portuguese dominance Indian Ocean and Arabian Ocean. I hope you are able to understand. After Almeida, the very next viceroy was named as Albuquerque. He was the next viceroy who is considered as the real founder of the Portuguese power at East. He was considered as the real founder of Portuguese power in East. Next point you write, he considered Hormuz, which is very much famous in today's time as Strait of Hormuz. Please write, he conquered Hormuz in Persian Gulf and eclipsed the influence of Arabian rulers in India. So as you all remember, like in the beginning we talked about the trade route which was established between Europe, Middle East and then Asia. So with the dominance in navy, they were able to boycott Middle East and Arabian dominance in the trade sector. So for Albuquerque, you just continue and write that he conquered Goa in 1510 and created a fort in Cochin with permission of local rulers. So I hope you were able to write all these points. After Albuquerque, we have another viceroy named as Nino de Cunha, who came in 1529. He was the next viceroy, and during his tenure, Portuguese acquired Daman and Diu, in 1534 and Bassein. I hope you know the Bassein is the traditional name of Bombay. In today's time it is called as Bombay, but earlier it was named as Bassein. After this, the last point under Portuguese we're going to write one of the most important impact on the Indian society due to the arrival of Portuguese was the arrival of the cash crops. I mean the very first positive sign, or you can say the very first impact in terms of agriculture was the arrival of cash crops. I'll not be going into the definition of the cash crops, I guess you all know. So under this, the primary cash crops that arrived in India were your cotton, spices, silk and tobacco. Please write cotton, spices, silk and tobacco. I hope you are able to write and understand what we have gone through. So after Portuguese, we're going to discuss about the Dutch East India Company. So before proceed, let me just explain you what is the meaning of British East India Company or any let's say you have Dutch East India Company or French East India Company. So they all were carrying the charters from their rulers to establish a trade center or to start any business on the behalf of the emperor or queen or king. So East India Company remains the common and there's only a naming difference and the basic core functionality remains the same. So I hope you are able to understand that not only British but Dutch was also a East India Company in the beginning when they arrived in India and the different Indian subcontinents part. Same goes for French, same goes for Danish also. So you will just write second European advent. They were the Dutch East India Company. So in this you write the very first point. A Dutch East India Company was established in 20th March 1602. Number B. Dutch were mainly interested in the spice trade. And opened trading port at Pulicat, Cambay, Surat, Kasim Bazar and Nagapatnam. Then Hariharpur, Dhaka, Patna and Agra. Please write. They were specifically into spice trade only and these were the areas in which they established their trading centers. Second you write, third point in Dutch. They had to face stiff competition with English, French and Portuguese. And fourth point, they also had monopoly of trade with Indonesia, which is considered as the major reason why they left India. Their primary focus was always Indonesia since the beginning. Hence, they were not very specific to the administration or setup of trade businesses in India. So after some time, when they were facing the stiff competition from French and British, they left the India and they were primarily focused on Indonesia. After this you write, the third one were the Dutch East India Company. The third one were Danish East India Company. They were established in 1616. They created trading outpost at they established trading outpost at Tranquebar, 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 Frederick Nagar, Friedrichnagar, Frederick Nagar, and Sirampur. Third point you write under Danish. They were more interested in the Christian missionaries activity and made Sirampur hub of missionary activities. So they were here for the religious practices specific to Christianity. Fourth point you write, Danish officer William Reverend Carey, Danish officer William Reverend Carey established a printing press in 1799 at Sirampur to publish Bible. So he established the very first printing press in Sirampur to publish Bible. Fifth point, in 1819 Sirampur College was established to provide higher education in Western style. So here I am writing in 1819 Sirampur College was established to provide higher education in Western style. I am just writing the crux. You can repeat the video and watch or listen what I am saying. So Western College. Okay, I hope you are able to understand. Now the fourth European that we'll talk about is the British, the very famous British. So just give me a minute. So we are at fourth, it's British East India Company. So in this we'll have a lot of details, so please write down. Start the paragraph. English Association of Merchant Adventurers was established in 1599 with objective of carrying the trade with the East. The basic point or the basic reason why Europeans came to the eastern part of the world was the same. They were all looking to expand their business opportunities and cut down the Arabian or the Middle East dependencies in their trade purposes. Second point, on 31st December 1600, Queen Elizabeth gave the royal charter for 15 years to merchant adventurers. So as we discussed in the beginning, all the East India companies, irrespective of British, Danish, French, all were carrying the charters or the specific rights given by their king, ruler or queen to expand their business. So in case of British, on 31st December 1600, Queen Elizabeth gave the royal charter for 15 years to the merchant adventurers. So let me reiterate, merchant adventurers were the very first person who started their business or who were trying to expand their business or trade with the eastern part of the country. So adventurers. Next point you write, over the period this company came to be known as the English East India Company. Next point, around 1608, British envoy led by Sir Hawkins came to the Jahangir court, who gave them the trading concession and also the Mansab status to the William Hawkins. He was given the status of Mansab. Now what's the difference between Mansab and the different formal positions we're going to discuss in our ancient and medieval classes. So at this moment you just understand that the British arrival happened at the time of Jahangir, and Jahangir gave Sir Hawkins the title of Mansab. But if I give you the context, then the Mughal Emperor Jahangir was not a great ruler. He was not at all very renowned for his policies and governance, unlike Akbar. So, after giving the rights of trade or the concession to the Britishers, all the concessions were revoked by Jahangir under the pressure of nobles in his court. So, you must be knowing that in Mughal Empire, king or the emperor were having a number of nobles. For example, if Akbar was the emperor, then in his nobles we had very famous Birbal. So around 15 to 20 nobles were present in every emperor's rule. So when Jahangir gave the Mansab title to Sir Hawkins, who was from English East India Company, many of his nobles were against this decision, and in their pressure, Jahangir revoked the concession rights which he gave earlier to the Britishers. Now write down the next point. By 1612, English completed the construction of warehouses in Surat and Masulipatam. So they started their establishment, and by 1612, Surat and Masulipatam warehouses were created. By next point, 1615, Sir Thomas Roe. I'm going to write next point here. 1615, Thomas Roe visited Jahangir court, and British were granted further trading concession, after which they established factories at Agra, Ahmedabad and Bharuch. Till 1612 they were only creating the warehouses. After that, Jahangir gave the trading rights to Sir Thomas Roe, who arrived in 1650 in Jahangir's court, and he was granted with the establishment of factories at Agra, Ahmedabad and Bharuch. I hope you are able to understand and write the points and write down the points. The next point. In 1639, they got villages on lease around Madras, where they created Saint Fort George. So I'll just gonna rub this down. I hope you have written every point. So I'm going to repeat the last point which I just said. Just give me a minute. So after this 1650, you can also consider this as the chronological order in which you can revisit and restudy whenever you are doing the revision. So in this way, in history, you can simply relate the terms and the activities or the incidents that happened, which will eventually help you in understanding or grasping things in a much efficient and fluent manner. So after 1615, by 1639, they got the villages on lease around Madras, where they created St. Fort George. Please write down the next point. In 1661, there was a matrimonial alliance between the Portuguese princess Catherine of Brizanga. So as you all must be aware that in traditional time, matrimonial alliances were used or had taken places to concrete the relation between the two empires, kings, or any XYZ entities, so that the conflict can be avoided, and at the same time the peace can be maintained for a longer period of time. So in 1661, before this, there was always a competitive conflict between the different Europeans that were there in the nation subcontinents, as we discussed earlier, that you had Portuguese, British, French, all those were having this focus on the Asian subcontinent. So in an attempt to make relations normal or friendly, in 1661 there was a matrimonial alliance between the Portuguese princess Catherine, I'll just write down the name, of Braganza with Prince Charles of Britain. So there was a matrimonial alliance between Britain and Portuguese. So with this matrimonial alliance, as a dowry piece, island of Bombay was transferred to British monarch. So as we studied earlier, Bessin was overtaken by the Portuguese in the beginning, and as dowry, Bombay was by 1668. Bombay was transferred as a dowry price. Island of Bombay was transferred to British monarch. In 1668, Bombay was transferred to the East India Company at the nominal price of £10. So, by 1661, island of Bombay was transferred to the British monarch, and by 1668, Bombay was transferred from the British monarch. It was transferred to the East India Company, English East India Company, by only £10. So this happened in 1668, and the dowry was taken place in 1661, but Bombay, island of Bombay, was given to the Britain, and from Britain it was purchased, or you can say transferred to the Britain English East India Company by 1668 with only £10. So you write down the next point. Bombay soon became the trading headquarters of Britishers. They entered in East India relatively late. By 1698, British also received 3 more villages on lease. These 3 villages were Govindpur, Sultanati, and Kalikatta. Kalikatta is your latest Kolkata. And what the Britishers did, they clubbed all 3 and formed Saint Fort Williams. Please write this down, and after this we'll be moving to the French. Okay, write down the next subheading as French East India Company. French East India Company. The basic difference, you can start with the very first point as the basic difference between the British East India Company and French East India Company was that British East India Company was a private company and French East India Company was the state owned. Now the basic difference here is your British East India Company and your French East India Company, it was like a private company with almost zero role of Britain government or parliament. But on the other hand, French was state owned which means the government involvement was very high. So in Indian context also you can understand the difference between the private and the public or the state owned. So there was a relative lagging but there was a मतलब इसमें वर्किंग में थोड़ी लैग थी जो फंक्शनरीज थी एज कम्पेयर टू ब्रिटिश. द ब्रिटिश administrative policies or the way they used to handle their day-to-day work and activities were very smooth, very finely tuned, which was not the case in terms of French East India Company. So write down under French East India Company. French East India Company was the last European company established in 1664. Next point. French East India Company from 1723 onwards was completely controlled by the French government. Next point. They established their factories in Surat. They established factories in Surat. Masulipatam, Pondi and Chandranagar. So in Surat it is 1668, Masulipatam it is 1669, Pondi it is 1673 and Chandranagar it is 1692. So French established factories in these places and these are the timelines. You can just write this down. Soon after the next point, soon after the arrival of the French East India Company, rivalry was started between French and British. Next point, with appointment of the French governor Joseph Francois Dupleix. Joseph Francois Dupleix in 1740. The rivalry aggravated because he was a very aggressive governor who was sent by the French government. The last and final point under the French East India Company was French were the first to initiate the strategy of interfering in the internal affairs of the Indian princely states or the Indian states to obtain the political mileage, but it was British who mastered this strategy and used it for eliminating the French East India Company. This last very point is very crucial in understanding the later phases of the modern history, where we'll see and understand how British understood this strategy in a very efficient manner and used this strategy in eliminating the Mughals and establishing their rule all over the India in a very fine manner. And to conclude, so this was the advent of Europeans, the very first chapter that we discussed in the beginning, chapter number 3 from the spectrum. Now we're gonna discuss a small topic, which was the later Mughals and the decline of Mughals. As I told in the beginning, the initial Mughal empire, your different from Indus Valley civilization till the time of Jahangir, Aurangzeb. We're gonna study that portion in ancient and medieval history, which we're gonna cover in the later part. So write down this topic. Later Mughals and decline of Mughals. So in this very first point, please write, after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, war of succession started among his son, in which Prince Muazzam defeated and killed his brothers Azam Khan and Kambaksh. Azam Khan and Kambaksh. He ascended to the throne with the title of Bahadur Shah. Prince Muazzam gained title of Bahadur Shah. So you can write a subheading named as Bahadur Shah 1707 to 1712, and in this, so this was a normal preface you can say, where when we ended the ancient and medieval history from Aurangzeb onwards. So when Aurangzeb died in 1707, there was a war of succession between his sons Muazzam, Azam Khan and Kambaksh, in which Muazzam defeated Azam Khan and Kambaksh, took the title of Bahadur Shah, and got the throne of the Mughal Empire. So write down Bahadur Shah. Very first point under Bahadur Shah is, he reversed the narrow-minded policy of the Aurangzeb and adopted the tolerant attitude towards the Hindus. So the very first prime example you can say, no Hindu temple was destroyed during his tenure. So as the time when we'll study this point in ancient and medieval history, so there was a certain definite policies by the later Mughals like Aurangzeb, and he was very much particular about destroying the Hindu temples. So this policy was stopped or reversed by the Bahadur Shah. Second point, he released the Maratha Prince Sahu. Please write. He released the Maratha Prince Sahu, who was the grandson of Shivaji. All these points we'll study in the later phase. At the moment, you just write this down. He released the Maratha Prince Sahu, who was the grandson of Shivaji, from Mughal captivity, who was captive since 1689. So you can understand the timeline. Since 1689 he was captive, and Bahadur Shah took the throne in 1707. So quite a long time. Next point, he also made peace with the Rajputs, Jats and the Bundelas. Rajputs, Jats Bundelas. He made peace with all of them. Next point, he also offered a very high mansab to Guru Gobind Singh, but after the death of Guru Sikh people revolted against under the leadership of Banda Bahadur. So write this thing down. Very high mansab was offered to Guru Gobind Singh. But after the death of the Guru, Sikh people revolted against under the leadership of Banda Bahadur. As you can see, Guru Gobind Singh was the last Guru, and after him, revolt happened under the leadership of Banda Bahadur. Next point. Bahadur Shah was often called as the Shah-e-Bekhabar, headless king, in bracket you can write, because he lavishly granted his Jagir. So here I am writing. Bahadur Shah was often known as Shah-e-Bekhabar, which means headless king. Next point you write, after his death, his son were in such hurry to grab power that they left the Bahadur Shah body unburied for about a month. I mean, this we can conclude that the succession of power was so brutal in Mughal Empire after the later Jahangir or Aurangzeb period, that to get the throne of this fellow, the sons who were in competition to get the throne, they didn't even bury the Bahadur Shah's body for a month, and they were consistently fighting for the throne, right? So under later Mughals we discussed Bahadur Shah, and now we're gonna discuss about Jahandar Shah. So I'm just gonna rub these points. Second, Jahandar Shah, 1712 to 1730. He was just after Bahadur Shah. Write down the very first point. He came to the power with the support of the most powerful noble, Zulfikar Khan. Zulfikar Khan. Second, Jahandar Shah was a degenerate person, fully indulged in pleasure, and as such the administration was fully in hand of the Zulfikar Khan. So he was a nonsense guy who was not at all worried about the whole empire, and the whole administrative process and the responsibilities were taken up by the Zulfikar Khan, who was just a noble. Under this, please write down initiatives under Jahandar Shah. Number 1. Even though the initiatives were under Jahandar Shah, but the primarily decisions were taken by Zulfikar Khan himself. So even though if the decisions were taken by him, the name would always be carried by the emperor who was on the throne. So under this initiatives, please write down the very first. He abolished jizya. abolished jizya. Now what is the meaning of jizya? It is a type of security tax or the poll tax which were given to the king or the emperor to practice his or her religion. Okay, we're going to discuss more about this in ancient and medieval history. Number 2, he started the Izara system. Izara, I-Z-A-R-A system, which is also known as revenue farming. So please write down some points of revenue farming. Under this system, the tax collection authority was given by the bidding process, and the highest bidder was given contract, who was known as the Izardar. Izardar. And this Izardar, he was free to extract whatever he could from the peasants, leading to the increased operation of peasantry. So first initiative, second initiative, third initiative. He granted the rights of Chauth, Chuth, and Sardeshmukhi, Sardeshmukhi, of Deccans to Marathas. Deccan to Marathas. Even though the Deccan Empire was under Mughals control, he gave the Chauth and the Sardeshmukhi rights to the Marathas to sustain peace. Now what is Chauth? Chauth is 1/4 of the revenue assessment. 1/4 of revenue assessment. And Sardeshmukhi, it is, here it is Sardeshmukhi, I am writing here, it is the additional 10% levy tax. So after this Chauth and Sardeshmukhis were given to Marathas by this Mughal of Deccan, what Maratha did, it in turn Maratha promised to maintain a contingent of 15,000 soldiers, 15k soldiers, in the service and protection of the Mughal Empire. So on this hand, we Mughals gave certain rights of Deccan to Marathas, and in return Marathas promised to have 15,000 soldiers for the protection of Mughal. So we're gonna stop here, and this is the completion of our lecture. You can refer the notes or the pointers that are given in today's class, and you can also refer the reference point or the reference book that I mentioned. So I hope you like this video, and please let me know your constructive feedback, and whatever feedback you have in the comment section. Do like and share and subscribe. So I will see you in the next one, in which we're gonna continue with the later phase of the Mughals. We're gonna discuss the different Mughal empires after Jahandar Shah, and subsequently we're gonna discuss all the decline of Mughals, the different rulers, the reasons of decline, political causes, economic causes of decline, socio-religious causes of decline. These are the 3 different parameters under which the decline can be classified as. And subsequently we're going to discuss the emergence of regional powers in the 18th century. So that we're going to discuss in the next lecture. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy this video.